And I think the same is true when it comes to the supply chain as well, in the sense that when organizations actually expand their strategy and maybe look at the services side of it in a bit more detail, there are innovative, agile suppliers out there that, again, that trust and that capability can be built and it can be shifted, possibly when you get these kind of new emerging areas where you might get somebody who's on the kind of leading edge of one area and they can help you transition to another area that might mean them expanding and developing as well. So I think it's a really interesting dynamic. But just to take it back to some of the nitty gritty. So clearly, compliance and cost are two big drivers at the start of this process. But actually, where it really starts to bear fruit is where you gain this understanding. As Dugald said, you kind of understand the status quo, and then it informs the net new opportunities as you move forward. So, Georgina, from a strategic point of view, firstly, creating those definitions feels to me like a lot of hard work. So can you talk a little bit about that? And also just in terms of how that definition process has gone into the decision-making process, or where that's gone into the decision-making process?
Sure. And it was hard work, and I think it continues to be hard work because terms, as I said before, are used and can be used interchangeably, and there's lots of lexicons of terms available, and it would be so helpful for us to almost create an industry standard and or even a UK standard. So selfishly, the Co-op are a UK only organisation, so something that's really relevant to UK tax and UK employment law from a definitions perspective would be extremely beneficial for me. And one of the words that was springing to mind when you were just asking me that question is accessibility and understanding. So whatever we create needs to be really basic and super accessible for people to understand the importance of and the benefit of, having really detailed and considered, informed workforce discussions. So we are definitely still on a journey, Johnny, so I would be foolish to sit here and say that we've got all of this nailed. We absolutely haven't. But our definitions are published. We have a SharePoint site that we've created at the Co-op, and our definitions are published on there, and we talk about, the pros and cons and almost the features of different worker classification types. We have created a team almost that act as that central point for queries on this is the particular piece of work that I'd like to get done, and often the decision is far broader than is it a contract or is it a statement of work. We are now starting to talk more and more about is it a recruit, train, deploy partner. So Grace is actually one of our current incumbent partners at the moment, and should we be really thinking about building our own capability if we know that data is going to be an increasing capability that we need in our organisation, is a more effective way to utilise our supply chain to help us to build that capability for the long term. So for me, from a strategic perspective, creating a mechanism and a forum where people can come and seek guidance and support, be that through SharePoint or a physical conversation, to get a sense of whether the capability and skill is needed for the long term, the short term, how critical it is to do it within budget or on time, can often mean that we can start to influence the decisions. It doesn't, but we're by no means experts. We're not accountable for the decisions that the buyer or the hiring manager effectively makes. But what we can do is be that first port of call and that concierge. So it would be great if we could find a solution that was technology led or robotics led, perhaps. But we're definitely not there yet. And actually, the value of the conversation is brilliant to help us develop our level of understanding as well from a business unit perspective. But strategically for us, it's about having the definitions that are accessible, easy to understand, commonly used in the organisation, so people understand that we're talking about the same thing, we're comparing apples with apples, integrated into our reporting suite where possible, so we can see the total workforce picture when we're reporting on our headcount or our establishment, for example. So it's about how we weave this into the DNA of our products and services, as well as the kind of language that we use.
Yeah, really interesting. So Dugald, from the point of view of dealing with this complexity, because I've seen the definitions, and there's a lot to it. It's not a when to do it, it's not a simple exercise. What was the process that you went through to firstly deal with the complexity involved and unearth it all, but then to try and simplify it?
Okay, so I think it was a step-by-step process, really, Johnny, and it was one of, you know, I think we started from that, you know, those two buckets: who's in control of the worker and the work, yeah, and then essentially, what did that mean, essentially, from a responsibility perspective? And I think that was a good, you know, guide, I think, and I think. Georgina's absolutely right. You know, the one of the things that's not very helpful is there's lots of worker categories they don't have legal definitions, right? Okay, there's no legal definition for a gig worker, for example. You know, there's lots of other workers that have been seconded by your suppliers, which make it much more complex to manage. But actually, if you take it back to who has responsibility for the work and who has responsibility for the worker, then that starts to help inform ultimately your obligations as the hirer and the obligations of the supplier, and it helps you to break out the value also that you're getting from the supplier that's bringing you the worker.